Okay. So, anybody have general observation about the process of daily reading? I mean, is it working, is it not working, what do you have?
I did it anyway.
Pardon?
I did it anyway.
Okay,
So.
what does that mean? You were doing it anyway?
Yeah.
This is-
It
did you-
may
oh,
not
you-
have been
yeah,
very
okay.
long, but I tried to do the
Okay.
motions of the day. So
No, I did with the portions, but not.
Anybody else?
that's what I
If
did.
it was any longer, I probably wouldn't be doing this because studying for Sunday school and that,
Yeah.
you know. So I guess it's all depends on the individual and what they hope to get from what they're trying to learn.
Personally, I try to read it, I read this every day, but some days I don't get it. But then I try to make it up the next day.
Well, and that's one of the reasons for generally not having big cover. So, yeah, because, yeah.
I think it's just the right dose or whatever. I mean, it's not just a couple of verses like a lot of devotional booklets are that I don't think get as much out of this compared to this where it's a bigger passage, but then the insights I think are so helpful. They really make me stop and think versus when I just read them in the Bible, it's my index card again. Oh,
Yeah.
yeah, here's the story of the feeding of the 5,000.
Yeah,
Okay,
okay, check
next,
that
yeah,
out.
here's the, and I just don't get the big picture.
Been honest.
Well, and I appreciate our discussion about that last week, and it's something I've been aware of for a long time. Pastors, contrary to everything they want to do, make the Bible seem fragmented. Or they do that sweeping, this verse, you can find it here, let's all turn back in our Bibles, and you spend the whole service doing this, and you even lose track of what the point is you're trying to make, rather than... Well, I will warn you in advance that when you get to Holy Week, it will be the most intensive reading of this study. And when I looked at how that was going to come, I thought, well, that's what you ought to be doing that week anyway. We really do. And so you're going to focus on the events of the last week. I said today you're only going to read 8 verses of the end of Mark, because Mark ends with chapter 8. Everything else has been added because they weren't satisfied with his ending. So your term paper will be on the following. Why does Mark end his gospel as he does? No, I don't.
I do 10 aha.
Okay. Uh-huh.
Okay.
Sure. But no, and no one else could use this in their paper.
Okay, well, it's what you were saying in the sermon today. Oh, listen, I took notes. Okay, what's Mark trying to get us to do? Here it is, you gotta figure it out. And so at the end of the story, he says, so what do you think?
The last words of
I mean,
Mark.
it's kind of like, here's the end of the murder mystery, here's the facts. What do you think?
Yep.
You have to process. Or the other gospels, you got the whole story. You got what happened the day after that. Who is this man?
The last words in Mark are, and they told no one. The women go to the tomb.
That's a
it's
lie.
empty, and
Well, it is,
it is a lie.
you know? Otherwise, we would have the story.
I mean, if that's true,
Yeah.
That's funny.
where did the rest of this come from? Okay, let's talk about the readings for this week. We began with the story of the feeding of the 5,000 and what makes this story unique in all of the Gospels. Dum, dum, da, 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 dum, dum, da, 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 dum, da, 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 dum. You know, if this is a final Jeopardy question, you're all going home broke. Pardon?
That wasn't Jeopardy music.
Yeah, but. Yeah, consider source of it. This is the only miracle of Jesus that appears in all four Gospels. What that says is, this is important. Why is it important? What's your take on that? Why was this an event that all four gospel writers, I mean, think about this. How much space and time and effort we devote to Christmas, and that appears only in 2 of the Gospels. But this appears in all 4, and we don't even have a feeding of the 5,000 festival.
Fellowship dinner.
Well, that's because we eat enough to feed 5,000, but that, I don't know, that was the point. Well, since I want to get to lunch, what is when you go back to the Old Testament people, what is the definitive act for the Jews?
Oh, okay. Manna, Exodus.
The Exodus.
Right.
The story of the Jewish people really begins with Abraham, but that's just background. It begins with Moses and the descendants of Joseph in bondage. And, Charlton Heston went out in the wilderness, and God said to Charlton, I will be your God, you will be my people, and I will be your God. And the whole thing is, I will deliver you out of this land of bondage and into a land that I will give you. So that leaving, that what we know as the Exodus story, is the definitive act. And every single year at Passover, we tell that story again. Because if we were having Passover, we would be reading the service out of Haggadah, which means story. Jews don't read scripture, they tell stories. Because this is all a family story. We are all sons of Abraham. I guess some of you are daughters, but, I don't want to get into that controversy. Yes. And so, the nature of Jewish religion is looking back. How do we know what God is like? And how do we know what God will do? We look at what God has done. So we know that as God once delivered us from bondage, He will deliver us in the future. We really do the same thing. What is your hope of future? It is on what God did through Jesus on Easter. See? And when we get together at the Lord's table, what's on the table? Do this in remembrance of me. Haggadah begins, my father was a wandering our man. Okay? In both religions, we go back to what is the original story that this is all based on. So, part of what's going on in the feeding of the 5,000, and it is shown in the reaction, especially in the Gospel of John. People want to make him king immediately. It is that whole association of what is the basic need of every human being. Food and water. Yeah. We're out in a barren country where there's not even a 7-Eleven open. And even if there was, there isn't no money to buy. And besides, the semi didn't come today, so we don't have any food. We can put it in modern terms.
First of all, you gotta get somebody to work.
Except, of course, the undocumented alien that we don't have to pay that much. Well, so what happens is Jesus takes almost as if it is contrived. Because what is Jesus doing that leads to this feeding? What's he been doing all day? Preaching. Now, as far as Jesus is concerned, he would probably say, what do you mean feed them? I've been feeding them all day. All right? Well, that's true, Jesus, but, night's coming. There's no food, there's no water. We need to let the people go to where they can provide for themselves. And so what does he say to the disciples?
Go and get something.
And so one of the disciples said, has anybody got the
We
group
don't have no
card?
money. Where are we gonna go?
Yeah.
We're just out here in the middle of nowhere.
Right.
And it's almost as if we're saying, okay, let's create a setting where hunger becomes a need. And we'll take what we have, which is pitiful in face of the numbers, And through the power of God, it will be enough so that there's even leftovers, plentiful leftovers. And then we play numerology again. How many baskets are collected? It's always going to be one of two numbers, 12 or 7. Yeah. Okay. So, yeah. And what that meant is there was luck. Now, part of the problem with miracles is miracles are always addressing physical needs. But Jesus always makes it a spiritual matter. Okay, so you were hungry and now you've been fed. So what? Tomorrow you could be hungry again. These cookies will only feed you for so long. Although actually the way the body stores, they'll be feeding me for some time. So part of what's going on here is taking, either creating a situation or taking advantage of the situation to, in essence, do a teaching through action. And basically, and if you read the parallels of all of the 4 accounts of the feeding of 5,000, the varying ways, parts as the story is told, are most interesting. But at the heart of the Jewish complaint against Jesus is you don't properly regard the faith of our fathers. Right? All this controversy about the law.
Mhm.
So what does Jesus do? Let's go back to the lawgiver. And what did he do? The people were hungry in the wilderness. And so God sent them manna. And what does the word manna mean?
Bread.
Bread from heaven.
Unknown or something.
It
Like a
means,
mystery.
what is it?
Yeah.
Which is every time you say to the kid, try this, you'll like it. What is it? Doesn't matter what it is, right? It's yucky. Yeah, it's like it's essentially dried bug. Okay, dried bug excrement. So, yeah. It's a source of grits, I think. Yeah. Well, but out
So
of
this was like Survivor, right?
yeah, well, I mean, that contrived situation of these people who every night, once the camera's turned off, are fed by, but on camera, this is just, here are the people out with no means to take care of themselves, and sooner or later, religious people are gonna go, God, what are you gonna do about this? Right? And God could say, well, on the way out here, you passed the bread store, you drove by Jack's Donuts, you came here with pockets empty, what do you expect? I provided for you, you didn't take advantage of it, now you expect me to do something. Almost like that, and then see, it's like you expect a lesson. See, I told you so. But before the crowd even raises the need, the crowd hasn't said we're hungry, they haven't gone, we gotta get home. The disciples recognize it. So
Disciples were hungry.
Jesus acts, and in so doing, he reminds them of how God provided manna in the wilderness. For how long did God provide manna in the wilderness?
Long time.
40
days?
years.
Oh, 40 years.
40
Oh, yeah, that's right.
years.
And the people complained about it.
Well, yeah. I mean, do we have to eat filet mignon again? I mean, my God, every day. Why can't we just have some tired hamburger? Yeah. So part of what's going on here is, what will Messiah be like? When God sends a Savior, what is it going to be like? It's going to be like Moses. Asked and answered. See? And kind of in that way, Mark tells you this story, and what he's saying is, did you hear that? Okay. This is not about hunger, and it's not about the hungry. It's about history and about preconceptions. This is what God is like. if we pray, God will deliver us. God has done that before. And in this case, before we even started talking about how hungry we were, God provided. But it wasn't Moses. Very good. Good. And this is a case where, like if you want to follow this story, this is one of those where you really be helped by doing a comparative study of the other four Gospels and noting, in one case they look around, they find one boy. And then in the Gospel of Jesus, which I've alluded to, and that is a cynical statement, we make that the story because a kid is in it. And so he can put him down in front with Susie. And in the other, it is, okay, the disciples put all together they have, and it's not much. And in the other, in other words, some of the details change, and you want to look, okay, how does that add dimension to the story? But the basic outline of the story is, oh my God. Yes. Okay, next.
Hey, just, they're on verse 40. Why hundreds and fifties in the seating? I mean,
Yeah.
what's the- I've looked and
yeah.
looked and can't find anything, and I just wondered if, usually numbers are significant,
Yeah.
and,
My off the top reading is that is probably because, according to the elder schedule, the deacons were all assigned a section, and so it's kind of like, settle down, folks. And the numbers don't have any numerological meanings.
yeah.
There is a detail in Mark that doesn't appear anywhere else. In every case, they sat down on the grass.
Right.
What does Mark say?
Green grass.
Sometimes, unintentionally or intentionally, the writer gives us, let me back up, where they got all this information, we're not sure. But sometimes there are hints that there is some vividness to the memory. When you have something that you remember distinctly, there's some little detail in that you always remember. I was wearing that red dress. I was changing that tire on that 57 Corvair. We sat down on the green grass. Now, if you have been to the hills of Southern California, there's only one time of the year the grass is green. All the rest of the time it is brown. Same time in Galilee. It's only in the spring when the grass is green. Okay. So, now, does that mean that was the time of year? Or is it just a reminder that wherever this story got, however Mark got this story, that person remembered the event with that little detail that made it vivid to them? And see, some of the guys in the crowd were looking around, seeing the grass and saying, time to mow again. Okay, yeah, that's right. Get the goats out there, there's food for them. Pardon? The walking on the water from Tuesday, do you find it odd how close this is to the calming of the storm? It's kind of, and I guess what amazes me is we've just talked about how the disciples are disappearing. And then here we are again. It's kind of like this story doesn't move along. And it's kind of like any good soap opera. We use the same story often because it was pretty good, so we can use it again. Well, at that time he was calming the storm. This time he's walking on the water. But in terms of what action, it's the same. They don't have any idea what's going on. I'm pausing to see if you have any questions about that you want to raise or any comments.
Well, towards the end there, he's telling them to be happy. Be of good cheer, it is I, be not afraid.
Yeah. Yeah, it's if these are that sequential, you know, as Mark sees them in the story. It's kind of like, have you guys forgotten last week? No?
This is a whole different thing.
Mhm.
It's not a ghost. This is this weird demon spirit. So do they still believe in spirits?
Anything you don't understand is the result of some bad spirit. So a person can't walk on water, so it must be a spirit. That's animism. The belief in that spirits are in everything.
Or the fear of the spirit.
Well, yeah, because and what you read in that is it's everything I don't understand. These are very unscientific people. What does it mean to say someone's scientific? We live in a scientific age. What does that mean?
You're just stupid.
It's beyond my
Yeah. Ignorant.
understanding.
Ignorant is a different word than stupid. Ignorant is you just do not have the
Yeah,
knowledge.
yeah, and stupid is you don't have the capacity.
Yeah,
Yeah.
you're stupid.
Scientific, the people of the book were not scientific. Scientific says, okay, what can we know for certainty? You know, it says green grass. Anybody see the green grass? Anybody have a picture of it? Yes? It's green. Okay, we know that. The non-scientific mind goes, why is that green? We ask the how, they ask the what. In other words, how can somebody walk on water? Well, nobody can walk on water. Therefore, since we can't understand it, it must be a spirit. It's a ghost. It's something bad. See?
And we talked, and the question was, he said, they just come from the city of Jesus, the miracle, et cetera, then why were they afraid? Jesus wasn't with them
Yeah.
on the storm, he was with them, and then, so they could have figured out, well, if he was here, but he's not here, and now something weird's happening. He's over there, way over there.
One way that commentators deal with the linkage, feeding 5,000, storm, what the heck's going on, is a reinforcement that the disciples don't get it. I mean, you just watched. You told Jesus it was impossible. This cannot happen. That's scientific thinking. How many loaves do we have? How many fish? How many people do we have? I can do division. Not enough. All we're going to create is a riot. The first ones to get fed are going to gobble it all down, and the rest of them are going to kill us for not having enough for them. Better for us to run. But they should have been in the boat because they, in response to Jesus saying, feed them, got in the boat and left as fast as they could. Fool's errand here. Okay? So maybe that's the linkage. What do I have to do for you guys to catch on? And Mark would say, keep reading. Keep reading. See, the mixture between television and movies and books is television wants you to know everything. There's really no mystery in mysteries on television because the clues are so obvious. You know, they give you the portent, you know, somebody writing, and all you see is the hand. And okay, that's going to be a part of the murder.
Or the character is a well-known villain. Anyway, he always plays the villain, so he has to be it.
And in most series, anytime there is a star, that means they're the bad person because we know they're not going to be on this next week. You know, and if you're a newbie, if you're an unknown on something like Star Wars or Star Trek, you're going to be the first to die. Well, yeah, we brought you on. We aren't going to pay you for 2 episodes. And I guess what I'm saying is that the pattern of Mark remains the same. No matter how much they discover and witness in Jesus, they just don't get it. You know, now, which is curious because he sent them out to preach and do miracles, and evidently they did a pretty good job. And yet, on Wednesday, we have the favorite part, the heavies in the story, the people who come down from Jerusalem. And we've talked a little bit about the geography of that part of the world. if, what in Indiana is like Jerusalem is to Galilee? It's like Bloomington is to Brown County. All knowledge and understanding is in Bloomington, unless of course you went to IU and, to Purdue. But those people out there, they're hicks in the hills. And so it also says something about the people in Jerusalem are in charge of keeping the faith. And there's something going on out there. We better check it out. Probably have gotten reports. So we send down some people to make lists. And we want to make those people evil. We would call them elders today. Well, yeah. Elders have a meeting, did you notice? Someone needs to be responsible that we stay spiritually straight. Okay? That's another one of those reoccurring themes in Mark. No matter what Jesus does, they're still back to, well, no. I noticed that the tassels on your prayer shawl were not hanging out, and that is what God expects. Or like the Catholic Church thing, well, the priest said, I baptize you rather than we, therefore God cannot save you. Okay. That leads us to Friday's reading, the Syrophoenician Woman, who gets all the play, but there is more action around the. Most books lead as a deaf mute, but this guy can speak, he just can't be understood. Not that that's a huge thing. It is also interesting that the woman, the story says he didn't want to be known. And this is in what we would call Lebanon today. This is not Jewish territory. And so it's another one of those, this is kind of going on vacation. We're getting away from the normal deal. And even there, he's known. And so what is he known for? Miracles. And so the woman comes insisting. And did you understand the interplay about it's wrong to take the bread from the kids and throw it to the dogs? It tells you what the Bible says about the purpose of dogs and why they are relegated by a spiritual man like me to a lesser place in God's order. They're the garbage disposals. They were there to clean up the mess that went on the floor. Cats, of course, were sitting on the throne, right?
Aristocrats.
Yeah. So what the woman is saying is, yes, even though this is intended for the Jews, just as the kids break the bread, crumbs go on the floor, and the dogs get fed, is there nothing here for me? You kind of have to know the plot line to go, oh, how did that miracle, did I get that in passing?
Is this also not a reference to Gentiles being referred to as dogs?
Yes, yeah. That's
Because
good.
the children would be the children of Israel.
Yeah.
You might take away their food, feed
Yeah.
it to the dogs and put the Gentiles.
Yeah, that's good. You get a star.
Wow.
Well, that's because
She's
I
a teacher's
read my-
pet.
Teacher's pet.
I read
Maybe she's
my
been paying
footnote.
attention.
Thank you. I read my footnotes. Feed it to the dogs. Jewish people often refer to Gentiles.
Yeah.
When you read it, you get the impression that Jesus really thought that he was only supposed to be saving the Jews, or doing this for the Jews.
You can, but he doesn't say, because this has been a
You
good
think
place to
that-
close that door, right? And like when he goes across, and that's, I said last week, the reason Mark has Jesus cross the lake over to Jewish territory, which will come with the feeding of the 4,000 next week, what God is doing here, following the expectation, a Messiah will come to save you. What you also have, what Mark wants you, Jesus is showing salvation in a new way, you know, and also preparing us for the fact it don't matter that the Messiah came to them, they didn't accept it. I mean, this is the reality of the church at the time of Mark. See? Jewish converts and Gentile converts. And how do we understand that? And how do we explain it? But yeah, it is that illusion. Yeah, very strongly. There's no comment about faith in this. I mean, I found that kind of interesting because in my mind, you know, he would have said, well, you know, because you have that insight, you know, I can't ignore faith like that, or desperation that's that clever. This is a part of the ongoing pattern of Mark, of giving miracles that happen equally to Jews and Gentiles, and that the Jews, and especially their leaders, refuse to acknowledge that the power to perform the miracle comes from God, which means it must come not from God. Therefore, it is wrong. And the fact that the Gentiles and the demons, in other words, the other side, get it. You know, this woman may not understand him as the Messiah of God, but she recognizes that whoever he is, he has power, and my child needs that. And in the second case, it's the people who bring this man to Jesus.
Since we don't know what the man did.
Yeah.
He had no more trouble talking clear, but it's the people who brought him
Yeah.
that were amazed, etc. You don't hear him dancing and screaming.
Yep. And there's quite a bit of travel between the woman in Tyre and the man in the Decapolis, especially if you're walking. You're up in the mountainous, hilly region of the north, and they've gone all the way up into about where Beirut is today, and then back down to the Sea of Galilee and to the east. You know, in an F-15, it really doesn't take too long, okay? But if the F-15 pilot is walking, it can take a long time, unless, of course, he gets away.
Okay,
Yep.
so one of the things I noticed though, I'm not saying was, she knelt. And then a lot of the demons came and knelt before Jesus. The act of kneeling indicates that they see Jesus as as a superior.
Yeah.
I mean, the whole thing that you kneel before someone. So even the demons and the Gentile woman, that you keep seeing that they came and knelt before him. I don't know, I just noticed.
That's a good point. In our religious acts, kneeling, which most of us don't do because we're old and therefore we can't be Catholics, that's based on political activity. The way you showed homage to whoever had power over you was to bow or to lower yourself. The king of Siam, no head can be higher.
Question. Did Jews kneel?
Jews stand to pray.
Yeah, they stand to pray. They don't kneel to pray. Is
Yeah.
kneeling something that they normally do? I don't know. Don't like that. So
No, I don't
is that
think so.
something that sets apart
It's
these
invented by the
non-Jews
Catholics.
in their encounter with Jesus?
Pardon me?
It was invented by the Catholics.
Yeah, that's right.
Absolutely.
Demonic.
And taken from how they responded to. What happens in the church is it becomes a rival of authority. Caesar is Lord, and every knee shall bow to acknowledge Caesar as Lord. And the church says, Jesus is Lord, and every knee shall bow. See? And that's the head-on collision the church is on.
And the first people to do that are the non-believers.
Yeah, yeah. When you get to Palm Sunday, are the people all going to kneel as Jesus goes by? No, they're going to destroy property and They committed vandalism, right? Did anybody ever notice that? They're tearing limbs off of somebody's, I mean, it isn't their yard, they're vandalizing, right? Come on, folks, where's the law and order here?
There are also lots of churches.
And then, and then in other accounts, they spread their clothes on the road in front of me. In other words, that's the way they would acknowledge and show homage, rather than the. Okay, good. The feeding of 4,000. Only real way that this makes it obviously doesn't have the same impact on them from the history of religion. It has an effect on them due to their hunger. That does not appear in all of the feeding of 4,000 does not occur in all the Gospels. When Mark says 5,000 or 4,000, how many people were present?
More than that,
What?
because they didn't count the women and
He
children.
didn't count the women and children, that's exactly right, so, yeah. Yep.
But it's the same, why is it not the same story?
Locations are different, real difference.
No.
What follows that on Saturday was an interesting thing. What do the Pharisees want in that last reading, chapter 8? Verses 1 through
They say they
13.
want a sign, but I don't think they really do.
Well, I think, yeah, with a little editorial comment there. Yeah, and it's like,
Yeah, I love that Jesus groaned.
They didn't leave that one.
how long, O Lord, must I endure this perverse generation? Yeah, it's kind of like, so what would make you believe? And did I make the allusion in the book about the Luke story of the rich man and dives?
Yeah, you did.
Yeah, and which ends with, they would not even believe if someone were to come back from the dead. And that, it's kind of the reality that it really doesn't matter what God's gonna do. These people are not gonna pay attention. And it is not predestined condemnation, it's choice. They had a choice, and they chose not to because, as one great preacher said, they had preconceptions they would not change. You may quote me on that, by the way. Okay, what else? Oh my, time goes by.
Those who are friendly but dull, he stays with. Cat can be dull.
Yeah. Yeah, what you've passed through is, we're almost finished with the time in Galilee, and we're about to, in the coming week, we're gonna make a turn toward Jerusalem. So, the difference between the three synoptics, Matthew, Mark, and Luke, and John, other than content and theology, which are two major items, is that John has Jesus going to Jerusalem at least 3 different years, which is why we have decided that Jesus' ministry lasted 3 years, because there are 3 Passovers related in the Gospel of John, which really could mean 2 years, right? Passover is the first starting mark, another Passover, and the last Passover. But the synoptics only record one. Which one's right, which one is wrong? They would look at you and I and say, I don't understand the question, why is that important? Okay. The second is, John could not even have told us all the time. I mean, we have no idea how long that time was. It's amazing if synoptics are right, that Jesus' ministry was it was like a one season. And to have that much impact on time, and even when you extend it to John and his 2-3 year period, that's still remarkably little time. We think of Israel as being a very small area. It was a very small area in Roman times, but in terms of the relating, there was no remote satellite broadcast from Galilee being shown live in Jerusalem at the time. Somebody had to make the journey by foot up there and report. So distance was more than physical distance. This would have been called a backwater of Galilee. Anything that happened that mattered happened in Jerusalem. Excellent.
Yes, thank you.
Thank you. I'll say this, but I won't say to anybody else, so don't tell anybody. It is very encouraging to have your response to this. And in the 13 years I was at First Christian, we tried a lot of things. And some of them were just downright clever. I mean, they just zero response. And then after a year, somebody said, well, aren't we going to do such and such again? No. You know, if somebody doesn't say, that makes a difference, why should I go on? You know, I'm not going to flog myself to see if you'll wake up. So your response is encouraging. You pass that along, put that in your memory about your next pastor. You know, if the pastor said, I would like for you, your response ought to be, I'll try it. You know, and if not, don't even bother calling the person. I mean, that's the gift the members can give to the pastor. And then you can say, next time, pastor, try something different. You're really not that good at that.
That's good too.
Yep.
I mean, we all know that in our jobs, and whatever job you have, you want feedback. You know, how you do it. You know, and pastors are the same way.
That helps you grow.
Yeah.
Well, that's what growth is all about. I mean, if you don't willing to try something else, you're not growing. You're in your preconceived box, and you're going to stay there.
And it could be, you know, the way to do that feedback is, it would help me, pastor, more if you would, you know.
I have a question too.
Okay.
Like, I've been looking for devotionals for a long time. They're more than just somebody writing about an experience they had and they find a verse to match their story. I like this. I like to, let's read a bigger segment, you give me a little bit of background, step back, look into it. Are there other devotionals that we can continue after this study that are more in-depth like this
I mean,
versus us?
other than the 27 I've written.
Yeah, I was gonna say, this is
We're running my hands
21.
on those other 26.
Did you not read the cover of this?
You know, I don't know the answer to that. Betsy's more likely to. The lady who is going to speak on the first, Kelly Stanley, we first met because Betsy heard that she was leading a women's study.
She was doing a program.
Doing a program.
She's a graphic designer
Yeah.
and a writer, and she'd written a book about coloring with prayer. At the time, I was doing coloring, and I thought that'd be cool, and I needed, and what I did is I needed something at that time. And so she's written, it was like, here's some stuff, and that you could read it, and you could add your color or whatever. And then we had a thing we could talk about in the group. And she's got one praying upside down and some different things like that. She's also just a part of a group of writers that does things. And I really respect Kelly and what she does, and she may have, when she speaks here, she may have some input on who are other writers that would have
Yeah.
some good. Or we could get a grant and just publish all Keith's books.
Well, it's
Otherwise, we have to sit and put them together watching television.
And the problem with the question is that when you go to a source like a religious bookstore or a site, what is available is what sells. And what sells is feel good. You know, I read something, oh, that's sweet, isn't it? The puppy dog, and Jesus loves the little puppy dog. I mean, you know, too much of it is trivial. It's designed to give you a little boost, but it becomes like a constant diet of candy. You know, in the end, it's not good for you, rather than something that challenges you. What I do is I read sermons, you know, and I, you know, go, that was a pretty poor job of that. I can do better, and that helps. But you know, like I never thought of it that way. So, it's a very valid question. I'm just at this point inadequate. Of course, Friday you could go to West Lafayette and listen to Carrie Newcomer. Yeah. So you don't know Carrie?
You don't know Carrie Newcomer.
My God,
She's
what
in
can I
Indiana.
do in this perverse
Lives in-
generation?
Lives in Bloomington. She's.
That's why you don't know her.
Yeah.
But she went to Purdue.
She's a singer-songwriter, mystic, kind of folky but not.
Quaker.
Spiritual but not. But I mean, just, and what I'm doing in the mornings is I read this, and then I have a book of her poetry, and I'll read one of those and reflect on that. But she plays guitar, she has a group that sings with her, and her songs sometimes are about nature or about the state of the world. She's wonderful. And she's gonna be at West Lafayette Federated Church. And she travels all over. I wish I could say better about she is, but I can't.
We will look into that question, see if
Yeah.
answers. Good.
I can tell you that I did Beth Moore one time. I don't know if you've heard Beth Moore studies.
Yeah.
I don't like it, because you watch the video and then she tells you what she, no. I don't want you telling me.